will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. Question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question related to an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And obviously members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically, and this morning we have Councillor Armstrong attending electronically along with those of us present in the chamber. We have no late items for introduction, Ms. Robertson. Motion for adoption of the agenda, moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Mayor's report.
Your Worship, Councillor Armstrong has her arm raised.
Sorry, Councillor Armstrong? They've just got you a tiny little screen up there, so I can only, Ms. Robertson with her keen eyes has spotted your hand. Is there something you wanted to say? Councillor Armstrong, can you hear me? I'm getting the impression she can't. Maybe we can take a minute to see if we can sort that out.
Okay, she's going to rejoin shortly. She just logged out and is going on. There we go.
It's working now.
Councillor Armstrong, are you with us and can you hear us?
I can now. I signed out and came back in and now it's working. There was no audio.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Mayor's report. I just want to comment on the Play On Hockey event held throughout the city last weekend. A good time was had by all. I think it really boosted community spirit. I want to extend thanks to all of those who participated, and most particularly Councillors Armstrong and Bonner. No, pardon me, I'm just teasing, Gesselbrock. We don't want too many seniors on the ice. Well, it was concrete actually. And Councillors Gesselbrock, who did yeoman service during the celebrity game. But I also want to publicly extend an enormous thank you to the Parks and Recreation Department. I heard nothing but incredibly positive comments from the organizers who said they were so pleased to work with the city and felt very welcomed in the city. And so I think publicly we need to recognize that and extend a round of applause, without clapping of course, because it's a council meeting, to all those. I also want to mention that the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation will be upon us on September 30th. Snuneymuxw First Nation, the city, and the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools are honoring Snuneymuxw ancestors, survivors, and families, and the Snuneymuxw way of being. There are a number of events, and the public is invited to participate. There will be a change of name out at the Sports Stadium District at 745 3rd Street from 10 to 11. From 11 till 3, there will be Snuneymuxw performances on the main stage at the Rotary Bowl. And pardon me, that's from 12 till 4, and 11 till 3 will be the opening ceremony, and then other speakers and events. So I hope that the citizens of Nanaimo will take advantage of the day to come out and show their respects for the First Nation of our community. I don't have anything else to report of significance except to say I recognize this is the first council meeting since the passing of the Queen and her burial on Monday. A bit of history for all of us, a bit of history. And I'm appreciative of, and I want to extend my thanks in particular to Branch 256 Legion and others who volunteered and were able to prepare and organize a ceremony that was held on Monday at 10:30 at the Legion. Having said that, I have nothing further to comment on, unless someone thinks I should. That we have Rise and Report simply for hearing everyone to hear it, and a motion for adoption of the consent items. Any consent items anyone wants pulled out? Not seeing any, then a motion for adoption. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor, motion carries. Thank you. We have no presentations. We have no delegations. We do have a number of reports today, though. And the first is the Van Quillen Conference Centre exterior sign replacement. In the absence of Mr. Corson, who's not well, I understand, Mr. Rudolph?
I'm here, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, pardon me. Well, you're just a tiny little face on the screen. I hope you're feeling better. Thank you.
Thank you. No, feeling fine, thanks. So good morning, Worship and Council. Just an information report for you on the Vancouver Island Conference Centre exterior sign. So this is the LED sign that is located on the corner of Gordon and Terminal Avenue. And many of you remember when the Conference Centre was opened in 2008, it was functional. It worked until about 2015, and then it failed. It's still in place. We've just turned it off. And in this year's budget, we had $121,000 and $200 to replace it. As staff have been looking into it, we realized we don't have sufficient funds to do that project, and we also realized that there's some permitting issues we need to get around. So what we'd like to do is cancel the project this year. And once we have a better plan of attack, we'll include it in a future budget for council consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Corson? Seeing none, appreciate the report. The next item is B, the nuisance property abatement, 52 Athletic Street. And Mr. LeBerge is going to deal with that. Good morning and welcome.
Morning, Your Worship and Council. So we do have the matter of 52 Athletic Street for your consideration for nuisance abatement. This is a property that came to the attention of city staff in 2019. Complaints from the neighborhood of large accumulations of garbage around the property, and our inspections determined that it looked like it was a operating drug house. There's strip bicycles and wire, and a lot of people living in the yard, etc. We've worked with that property for about a year to remediate the issues at the time, and the owners were quite responsive. This property came to our attention again in 2021 for substantially similar types of situations that we were seeing in 2019. We were intending to bring this matter before council 9 months ago, but the RCMP indicated there were a number of criminal investigations that they wanted to take precedence over the nuisance abatement. And over the period of about 6 months, they executed 3 search warrants related to drug activity and some significant violent crimes. And regrettably, it culminated to a homicide incident in early August. And there was a fire set in the property. And since that time, it's been boarded up, and a lot of the contents of the house were removed to the outside. In speaking with the owners, it's our understanding that they intend to eventually clean up the property and sell it, but the neighborhood informs us that since the property's been boarded up, that there's still a lot of the people that were related to that house that return to it on a regular basis. They're going through the contents, they're leaving provocative signs that are menacing the neighborhood, and the neighbors say in some respects they find it more fearful to be in the neighborhood now that the house has been boarded up than when it was operating. So this may play out and eventually be cleaned up and sold, but it would be the recommendation of staff that the council consider designated as a nuisance, just to ensure that the property owners realize the full extent of impact of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I understand we have a delegation, and Randolph Rausch. I can see you on the screen, Mr. Rausch. If you want to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. In regard to this, I think some things have been covered that, yes, we intend to sell as soon as it's appropriate, with the insurance and the damage taken care of. We have also got trash to go on ready to to give us an estimate, take a look at it and see what, expenses are as far as getting rid of the trash that's around and various other items of nuisance. Beyond that, you have something to say, Susan? My wife is here as well.
Yes, unfortunately, our daughter has been taken advantage of and had people move in there that were not very responsible. In fact, not at all responsible. And so she's trying to deal with the fact that the insurances hasn't come through and she has nowhere to live. She's on disability. So it's a really sad situation. And yes, I understand that the neighbors are fed up and we're fed up too. So we're going to sell it as soon as possible, but the insurance doesn't know exactly when it's going to be fixed up. And I think they were thinking that maybe 4 months, but it could be longer. So thank you and sorry about all that's been happening.
As far as the people still coming onto the property is really a hassle, but perhaps it will be dealt with when we get the trash out of there, the trash to go people. And I'm not sure how else to keep them off the property. They obviously want some things out of it, and I don't know where to go from there, but yeah, we'd appreciate your consideration.
Thank you to the two of you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Not seeing any, there is a recommended motion. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I see we've got the same old problem with the mic. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that I will support the motion, and I do have sympathy for the delegation. I appreciate you attending today and filling us in, but the situation, in fairness, has gone on for quite a long time, and this is just the next step in formalizing the city's response. So appreciate your efforts, and I hope you continue to work on solutions, but I think this is the appropriate step for the city to take at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. If I may add to what Councillor Thorpe has said, and staff will correct me if I'm wrong, this has been a long-standing problem. I appreciate it's not your desire to have had the mess created there in these circumstances, but the costs to the city have become significant over time. The effect of this, if this motion passes, will not be a notice on the title to the property, will not impact your ability to dispose of it in the future. But if there are expenses incurred by the attendance of the police, etc., then they will be charged to the property and will have to be paid eventually. So I can only encourage you in the circumstances to carry on with the cleanup as quickly as possible in order to avoid the attendance of other members of the various folks who have to attend, and that would probably be the most satisfactory arrangement. If there are no other speakers, the motion's been made. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the continuation of home energy assessment rebates. Ms. Bopal Singh, good morning.
Good morning, Council. I'm going to be fairly brief. The report you have before you includes a recommendation to give us some bridge funding through the Climate Action Reserve to allow the continuation of the home energy assessment rebates. I've got Ting Pan if you've got any questions about it, but essentially we've seen a very successful uptake in 2022 of this rebate program that was started in 2018, and staff would like to be able to continue this until the budget kicks in 2023 for the allocation. So without further ado, if you have any questions, I've got Ms. Pan with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions. I think Council will hardly question this small request. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Gesselbrock. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is consideration of other grant application, and that's the Catnip Society. And Ms. Mercer, good morning and welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Worship. The next two reports, I'm going to hand over to Ms. Slater to introduce them and then walk you through the recommendations for this one and the permissive tax exemption report.
Good morning, Ms. Slater. Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So the first report I have to introduce is another grant request from the Catnap Society. The City of Nanaimo has received another grant request for the work that they do with their trap, neuter, and release program, and that helps to control the feral and abandoned cat population in the community. There was one report that was completed by Nielsen Strategies, and this is back in the end of 2019 now, to review animal control services. And one of the recommendations was to provide some form of funding to the Catnap Society so that they're able to sustain their operations. As such, the staff recommendation in the report is to award the one-time grant request for $15,000. And that we've actually added another point to consider in there. We've noticed that over the past number of years, our other grants budget for $7,500 seems to be consistently exceeded year over year, and so it might be something that council would want to consider as a decision point for the next budget cycle, to potentially consider maybe putting some additional funding into the other grants program, because it seems to be oversubscribed each year. So just something potentially to consider. And otherwise, staff are available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I have seen this come before council since the time that Mr. Rattan was mayor as well. And every single time there's a report created, it comes to either, back then it was to a committee, and then it comes to council recommendation. And now we're having more reports. And I'm just looking at the amount of time spent on creating reports, and every single time we give them the money they ask for, roughly. So when we are looking at the budget and increasing that, this is one of the items that actually pushes us over on a pretty regular basis. And I would prefer to see it if somehow in the budget as a standard budget thing, and we don't have to deal with it anymore, because I imagine they're going to continue neutering cats for the foreseeable future, hopefully. Anyway, that's my thing. I'm in support of this. I just think we're spending way too much time on reports when it's an annual thing.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess following along from Councillor Bonner's comments, yeah, I recall this discussion several times, and my memory must be faulty. It often is, but I thought that we had determined to include the SNP program as a budget line item some years back. I don't see that in the report, so I must be incorrect.
Oh, sorry, through the chair to you, Councillor Thorpe. There's been two separate grant requests, and one of them is from the SPCA for the SNP program, which is the spay and neuter program, and then this request is actually separate from the Catnap Society for their trap, neuter, release program. So they're two separate organizations, but entirely correct in the fact that each of these organizations, well, SPCA has come before. This is the first time you've seen a Catnap application before you, but definitely an ongoing request for animal control funding.
Thank you.
And Councillor Martman.
Thank you, but mine is a question for staff. Is that okay? I'm just wondering, through you, Your Worship, how much is in our Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Fund at this time?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Martman, I will have to get that balance from Ms. Fulla back at the office, but I will get that for you.
Thank you.
Is someone prepared to make the motion? Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmons. For what it's worth, I want to comment. I'm particularly impressed by this organization because it's 100% volunteer driven. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I can claim joint ownership of the new cat that's arrived at our house. And I think it would ill behoove this particular council, having passed the Animal Responsibility Bylaw, not to approve support for the Catnap Society. If there are no further questions or discussion, Councillor Brown?
Thanks. Just following up on Councillor Martman's question, I just think with any of these reports, we should, if they're being funded from somewhere, we should have the amount in the report. Thanks.
All right. All those in favor and opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. And I think Councillor Bonner's remarks and comments entirely appropriate this morning. The next is consideration of new permissive tax exemptions. Ms. Mercer, are we over to Ms. Slater right away? Or sorry, pardon me, Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner moved option number 1, correct? But we never discussed adding a decision point for council consideration to the 2023-2027 financial plan to increase the annual funding amount for other grant stream.
Councillor Bonner. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Back to new permissive tax exemption. Ms. Mercer, or do we just go straight to Ms. Slater? Ms. Slater, please. Thank you.
It's good there are 2 in a row. So permissive tax exemptions. Every year, there's a June 30th deadline to submit new permissive tax exemption applications. And at the August 29th council meeting, we did review a group of permissive tax exemption applications. There's one more that unfortunately wasn't able to be brought forward to the last report. If I'm being completely honest, it got stapled to a bylaw, and that was me. And so I'm bringing this as a separate report because this application didn't get included with the original bunch. So the staff report outlines that the Nanaimo Hungarian Cultural Society meets the requirements for a PTE under the Council's current grants policy documents. And of course, staff are here and available to answer any questions. We do have a number of cultural societies already included in our PTE bylaw that comes forward each year. And you'll see me again in October for first 3 readings of the potential permissive tax exemption bylaw. And then of course, adoption before October 31st is the legislated deadline.
Councillor Bonner, moved, seconded. Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the quarterly purchasing report, single and sole source purchases in excess of $250,000 and instances of non-compliance purchases. Ms. Mercer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I get to this one, I can tell you what the balance of the SIR reserve is, and that is it's just a little over $3.1 million in that reserve currently.
Thank you. So we have a couple of bucks.
Okay.
Hesitate to use the term mad money.
So the purpose of this report is to provide council with information regarding sole source, single submission purchases and policy compliance per the city's procurement policy for the quarter period April 1st to June 30th, 2022. So attachment 1 outlines our sole and single source purchases, and attachment 2 outlines our purchases over $250,000. There were no instances of non-compliance with the purchasing policy for the quarter. And staff are here to answer any questions you may have about the items in the report.
I'm not seeing any questions about it, Ms. Mercer, so thank you very much. The next is item G, financial results for the 6 months 2022 to June 30th. Please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with the financial results for the city at June 30th, 2022. So this report includes information relating to both the day-to-day operations as well as the status of projects. So in previous years, we have separated out the operating results and the status of projects into 2 reports. But to be consistent with current municipal best practices for reporting, we've combined them into 1 report. So I'll start with the operating results. So at the end of quarter 2, we're projecting just under a $3.4 million surplus for all 3 funds. Attachment A gives a brief description of any variance over $100,000, and Attachment B gives an overview of all the operating variances by department. So for the general fund, we're looking at an estimate of just over $3.7 million surplus by the end of the year. And the bulk of this variance comes from vacant positions. So the city is no different than any other aspect of the economy right now, and we're struggling to fill vacant positions. And so that is the bit of the story here with our surplus. We're anticipating an additional $800,000 in interest income. As the interest rates continue to rise, our interest income rises as well. So that number could be higher by the end of the year, depending on how many more interest rate hikes we get. We're anticipating $321,000 in additional revenue from grants in lieu of taxes. So there was some additional properties that were paid grant in lieu this year that we hadn't anticipated. So grants in lieu cover property, land and property owned by governments, such as office buildings, warehouses, and courthouses. So we don't actually issue them a levy, like a tax notice. They pay us a grant in lieu. And we are anticipating just a little over $1 million in additional building inspection revenues. So as construction continues to boom in Nanaimo, so does our building permit revenues. And so those are the big items that make up our estimated surplus for the year in the general fund. For sewer, the sewer fund, we're looking at pretty much being on budget with a $79,700 surplus expected by the end of the year. For our water fund, we're looking at an approximate $436,300 deficit. And the story here is mainly revenues. With a wetter spring and early summer, the revenues weren't as high, and therefore we haven't seen the revenues we have in previous years when it's drier. And then that variance was offset by some position vacancies, so that the two net out to that deficit. So just some notes on how we would allocate the surplus at the end of the year. So as you know, per our reserve policy, our first order of business is to chop up any of our reserves that have dipped below their minimum balance. And then the remaining is allocated based on staff and council recommendations. So it's anticipated this year that we would need surplus to top up the RCMP contract reserve in the amount of about $1.6 million. So if you remember, we used this reserve to fund renovations at the police station and the annex buildings. So we need to top that one back up. And we anticipate another $130,000 needed to go to the snow and ice control reserve at the end of the year. So, and as well, likely at the end of the year, staff will be recommending that the remaining surplus be allocated to the General Financial Stability Reserve and be used to fund the new accounting standards for asset retirement obligation liability. So this is a new accounting standard that comes into effect for 2023. And the city is required to record any legal obligation associated with retiring a tangible capital asset. So our facilities are a big one, where our facilities are older and would have, say, an asbestos component. So we would have to record the liability and then amortize that. So we haven't funded that. So that's why we were recommending potentially to put that into the General Financial Stability Reserve and use that money to fund whatever liability we end up with at the end of the year. So we're currently working on determining what that value is, but of course we don't have that number for you today. But we do anticipate that the liability will be significant. So we will continue to update you as we get more information. There's a huge working group right now that's working on that. And so we will, when we have an update, we'll bring that to you.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Me?
Councillor Martman?
Thank you. Through you, and I'm not sure if Mr. Corson's on the line. I'm just wondering if there's any more information about the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation.
Mr. Rudolph, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Martman, do you have any specific questions? I can tell you the board is meeting today, this afternoon. The plan is to, from henceforth, meet monthly. I think it's similar to the Systems Planning Organization had their first collective board meeting yesterday, is my understanding. So all these organizations are getting up and running. We still have not filled the recruitment for the CEO of the Prosperity Corporation, but all the positions are filled on the board for the Prosperity Corporation. There has been ongoing meetings with the recruitment group that are doing the recruitment with the assistance of an executive search firm. And so that's all I can tell you at this time, unless you have some specific questions.
No, that's the information I was looking for. Thank you.
So the next we have projects. I'll go through the second half of the report.
I've got
Oh,
Councillor
sorry.
Hemmens and Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through you to Ms. Mercer. On the asset liability accounting, I'm just curious, does that mean at some point we're going to have a dollar figure attached to all of our aging pipes in the ground, and we're going to understand in terms of when things are going to time out? Because we've been putting, 1% away in asset management, but that's been kind of a vague figure. So will this exercise tighten up our understanding of exactly when and how much it will cost to replace what we have in the ground?
I'll let Mr. Bailey answer that because he's been involved with this. But yes, it does work in tandem with asset management and valuing of the facilities. But I'll let Mr. Bailey answer that.
And if I may, just a further, the accounting exercise in the way I'm thinking about it would be prior to actually understanding what the costs will be. So we're taking a first step in this process. Is that accurate?
I'll just jump in here through the chair to Councillor Hemmens. So the Asset Retirement Obligation Standard is an accounting standard that's kind of a separate standard that's a PSAB-driven initiative. And basically what it's after is any legal obligations the city has to deal with any things like asbestos, more remediation of things. So pipes are out of scope for this exercise, linear assets. The big one is asbestos in all of our facilities. We know we have an obligation there to deal with this contaminant, and we have to basically set up a payable to deal with that in the future, and we have to fund that. So we're adding to the value of the asset, but it's really something at the end of its life we know we have to deal with. Other examples are chemicals like ammonia, dealing with contaminants like that. So it's kind of separate from what you're asking about, the asset management piece.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. This is I'm sure there's an accounting reason for this. We just had a report that says we're not doing the sign because it was over budget and there's bylaw variations probably of $121,000. And now we find out, and we have staff telling us there's $3.5 million going to be surplus at the end of the year. And I'm just wondering why we would cancel that one when we know we have money there and it's in the bank sort of thing.
Ms. Mercer.
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner. So that project with regards to the sign, there was other issues around that as well. So that it wasn't just a financial number. What we would do, we wouldn't necessarily use surplus right at this point to fund a project in case something came up and we didn't have that funding. So it's more of a, if we did put money aside and say our general capital reserve, then that money could be used to fund projects like that after the year end when we knew what our surplus was. But with that particular project, there were other issues around permitting and things like that with it that also initiated the project being canceled.
I see Mr. Corson's come on screen. Did you want to add something, Mr. Corson?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Worship. I was just also going to add that one of the things we wanted to tie that sign project back to was the overall sponsorship program and kind of revenue streams for the city. So that's something we're still working on and haven't really need to bring that back to council for your consideration in the future. So that was another reason why we wanted to defer at this point in time.
Yeah, and it was more of a generic question, and we just cancel something, and we have $3 million in theory in surplus, right? So I was just wondering how the accounting stuff works, being not an accountant at all.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Please continue, Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the purpose of this information is to provide council with a summary of the status of our 2022 projects at June 30th. So this includes both operating and capital projects. And these projects are broken down into 4 status categories. As usual, the completed, substantially complete, work in progress, not started, or delayed or on hold. So our total project budget for the year is $145.9 million. To June 30th, we have spent or committed $83.4 million, or 57% of the budget, and that leaves $62.5 million of funds available to finish up those projects. So approximately 18% of our projects are completed or substantially complete at June 30th. 52% are in progress, 21% have not been started, and 9% are on hold or delayed. So attachment C gives a summary overview of projects in each area and highlights the bigger projects within each of those areas. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have regarding to this report.
Not seeing any questions from anyone. All right, thank you very much. The next is council expenses for the 6 months ending June 30th, 2022.
Thank you, Your
Ms.
Worship.
Mercer.
So this report provides a summary of year-to-date expenses or year-to-date to June 30th for each member of council for your expenses. So this information is compiled throughout the year and is included in the Statement of Financial Information or the SOFI report at the end of the year. So this is for information only, but if you had any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've already expressed this comment to Mr. Rudolph and I think Ms. Mercer of the Finance Department. When I look at these numbers, my comment is that council is encouraged to attend community events and conferences, and obviously the cost of attending those events has risen as a result of inflation. And when I'm looking at my expense report, for example, I note that I am over 100% committed, which at first glance embarrassed me, but then I realized I hadn't done anything unusual. I just attended the conference that I was expected to attend. So obviously what I'm trying to say is that our budget for these events has not kept pace with inflation, and I would just wonder if that's something that should be looked at in future budget deliberations.
Through your worship to Councillor Thorpe, yes. So Ms. Gurry has said she was going to look at those and make sure that they're adequate. So the budget or the bylaw for council is updated as well as looking at the budgets for the individual items. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, and you sometimes wonder if the public understands how City Hall works. I'm the only one who gets an office. All the other councillors, many of whom use and have internet service paid for by the city, are working at home. We don't provide them with an office. Council members don't get a separate staff. In terms of people who actually look after me directly in council, that's Donna Stennis, essentially with the assistance of Victoria Bowering and other staff. And so I wouldn't want the public to get the impression that somehow I'm being frugal and the rest of council's not when it comes to internet service, as an example. It is simply a reality of the way City Hall functions, and that accounts for perhaps higher expenses than, well, I should say not higher expenses, but lower expenses for me than might otherwise be the case. And I think people need to understand that. It's not that I'm being frugal, it's just that I actually have a place to go every day, and council doesn't. The other thing I would point out also is that, and the people of Nanaimo should know this, notwithstanding we're bigger than the City of Victoria, I operate and council operates with Donna Stennis, and the City of Victoria has 2 people working in essentially the same position. So as far as expenses go, I think that the city is well served by this council in terms of its keen attention to numbers, and no better example, of course, than our friend, and we won't have him to kick around much longer, our dear friend, Councillor Tightwad Turley. Any further questions on this particular item? If not, thank you very much. Ms. Mercer, the next is Sustainable Procurement Update, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it has been 1 year since the city's sustainable procurement policy came into effect. So a lot of hard work and effort went into the creation of this policy, and this report is a means to update council and the public on the results of the work to date. So it was an organization-wide effort to get the policy developed, and with most of the heavy lifting done by our purchasing department. So I thank Ms. Rushton and her crew for their continued commitment to moving this forward. So to date, we have had 16 RFX documents undertaken with a sustainable criteria component. 5 more are in a work in progress, and with another 4 coming in the near future. And the summary of these RFX documents can be found in attachment D to the report. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Rushton to give you kind of a little bit of a summary on the things that they've been working on this year.
Thank you, Ms. Mercer. Good morning, Ms. Rushton, and welcome. You're on.
Oh, I am on. Okay, sorry. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much.
If you can come a little closer to the...
Thank you so much. There we go.
Thank you.
Just a personal note on the sustainable procurement policy. I'm so proud of staff and their efforts under this policy in a time when anything related to procurement or supply chain is a challenge right now. But our mandate is to apply the policy, and in doing so, we reach a new audience each and every time, and we create an awareness, and we move that sustainable dial just a little bit more in a positive direction, and we look forward to the opportunities and new learnings as we continue this on our journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I may, before I go to Councillor Martman, my understanding is that I won't mention any other cities by name, that we have taken a fairly deep dive as a city on this in comparison to communities of similar size, and I just want to offer compliments to staff who've led that, and for council for ensuring that kind of leadership that's enabled us to do this. So thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, and thank you for this report. So I don't know, Council, I actually go to the quarterly social procurement. I've seen it grown from Vancouver Island to BC. This has to be the best kept secret we've had in our city, because here I am on the quarterly calls, and I know you've been on them too, Ms. Rushton, and we haven't spoken on all these items that we've actually used Hippo for, or the other tools. So I'm hoping, if this council is back in the next year, or whichever council is back, that these reports come more frequently, like on a quarterly basis, after our quarterly meetings that we have with the province, to say how we're doing and what we're doing and how it's being successful. So I'm just so proud, and I can't wait for the next quarterly meeting now so we can just show off a little, but good work for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? No sense gilding the lily. Thank you very much, Ms. Rushton.
Thank you.
The next is the UBCM Asset Management Planning Grant Application Ecological Accounting Process Partnership. And that's Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you, Worship. Morning, Council. So the report before you is really a grant application for UBCM's Asset Management Planning Grant, but the result of it is that this will invest in some capability or capacity building at Vancouver Island University as part of the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Initiative, MABRI, which is a dedicated institute within VIU, so it's not dependent upon faculty. So the Partnership for Water Sustainability in BC has been working with MABRI over a few years to work on process known as ecological accounting. And so the idea behind ecological accounting is that it provides a value to stream courses, both a financial value to stream courses, so that we can see what kind of investment we're going towards stream courses. The overall idea is that our storm drainage system, as an example, consists of gray and green infrastructure. So we rely on pipes to convey storm drainage and get it away from roads and properties, but we also rely on stream courses to convey that water to the ocean. We don't have a good means of valuing stream courses. This process has been, sort of, as I say, worked on for a number of years to provide that value. And that will help feed into our overall asset management and ensure that we're working and placing a value on the green infrastructure. So there's been a number of discussions with the Partnership for Water Sustainability and other municipalities, notably the Regional District and North Cowichan, to sort of all work together on putting this grant application or a series of grant applications in to embed this capacity within VIU, so that MABRI will oversee planning, geography, GIS students in working on this value. Each of the municipalities will provide some in-kind as well as financial support for the municipality. We would provide some expertise around what our streams are and some mapping and so on and so forth, and then MABRI would take that and exploit it. The contribution proposed is $30,000 per year from each of the municipalities, and it would be offset to the tune of $15,000 with 50% funding from the UBCM grant. If council is amenable to this, I'm happy to take further questions on it. There's a lot of depth to this, but if council is amenable to the recommendations, I would ask that we would just modify the recommendation to say, to remove the word joint application from line number 1. So each of the municipalities would provide their own application to UBCM, and it keeps us independent. The intent is still to work as a large partnership, but this would help keep it independent. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. In order, Councillors Turley, Bonner, and Gesselbrock.
Actually, Mr. Sims already answered my questions. So.
Any others? Thank you. Very good. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. In the event that we don't get the grant, this work will still go through. It just that we'll just be paying $15,000 more a year.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that it wouldn't stop it. Thank you.
Your Worship, I have heard a rumor that UBCM is quite enthusiastic about the project, and I never want to say guaranteed, but they're certainly enthusiastic about the project.
Very good. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. Glad to see this report. I think sort of looking into natural asset evaluation has been on the books for a few years now, and it's good to see it move a bit more forward. So yeah, I'm supportive of this application, and definitely in terms of interest from UBCM and other entities. I know sort of the natural asset evaluation and is top of mind for everyone. So I think there'll be a lot of support out there. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens making the motion. Seconded. Councillor Bonner. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. The next is the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant. Mr. Sims again.
Thanks, Your Worship. As you can see in the report, this is an annual program that British Columbia has. It was a number of years ago at about $500,000 a year. More recently, they've increased it, and we've been fairly successful on a number of projects, most recently on both phases of Metro, receiving $500,000 each. Over the summer, a number of staff met to review potential projects, and that's the application that, or the appendix you see attached. Staff are putting, a list of 4 projects in the discussion for council's consideration and recommending 2, which are the Albert and 4th Complete Street Phase 2 and the Midtown Gateway multi-use pathway, which is the pathway essentially through Bevan Park and the Midtown Gateway. It's currently under construction. So the main driver, all good projects, the main driver for those 2 is it actually maximizes grant funding. So if successful, those grants would see a total of $500,000 each, and that can offset the funding currently dedicated to those projects to others. So.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Turley and then Martman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sims. I'm assuming that the answer is going to be yes, but I have to ask anyway. And that is these 4 projects, given the supply and train issues and other issues, is it doable? They will be completed by March of 2025 as required by the grants?
Yep. Thanks, Your Worship. It's a good question, and it's something we wrestle with for sure. But in this case, we're confident that we'll be able to complete. The advantage to having the higher value is that it gives us an extra year to finish the projects as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I understand that the biggest bang for our buck, if we were given the grants, was the 2 projects. But to see those go ahead, and I'm very concerned about Trans-Canada Highway and the whole south and etc. So if we don't put them in with the grants, I can read where the project's currently in the 2022-2025 financial plan, but how soon do you anticipate us being able to make some type of improvements in that area?
Your Worship, on Councillor Martman, you're talking about the Trans-Canada sidewalk on second page of the report?
Yeah, Trans-Canada with Cranberry to 12 sidewalk for connection.
So that is within the plan. It is, council's approved the funding for that, and that work is underway, not physically, but the design, the planning and the design work is currently underway. So the life of the project may be 12 to 18 months before we see that, but it's still intended to proceed.
It's still there.
Even with or without a grant application. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm not opposed to applying for grants through you, Your Worship. I'm not opposed to applying for grants, of course, but I guess I have a hesitation when I feel, although these projects might be in the budget, I don't know what they actually look like specifically, and I focus now on the Midtown Gateway multi-use path, where we've already heard concerns from businesses in that area because of what's been done so far. So if I'm going to support applying for a grant for a new mobility link through that area, I want to know how it's going to impact the neighborhood, the businesses, the transportation, the flow of traffic and so on. So that's my concern, Mr. Sims. I'll support applying for a grant, but I would appreciate knowing in more detail exactly what that grant would be applied to and what the project would look like. That's my comment. Thanks.
Your Worship, we're happy to provide that I'll distribute an overview of the project, but briefly and verbally, it is a multi-use paved trail and lighted trail through Bevan Park, adjacent to or beside the Bevan Parkway, the current roadway that runs through the park, and then across Bowen Road and through the current construction project, which is the colloquially known as the Boxwood Connector, previously known, now referred to as the Midtown Gateway. So that project really is intended to improve the flow of traffic, as well as have an active transportation component through the project. So we have a significant piece of property there that we're exploiting not only for brownfield remediation, future development by a prominent local developer, but also to alleviate some of the traffic issues in the Bowen Northfield area and to provide an active transportation link between the in-and trail and the off Bowen bikeway.
Right, thank you, and I appreciate that, and it sounds wonderful, and I hope it goes ahead. But I guess my point is that if council is not fully aware of the ramifications of projects, then we get criticized sometimes, and then we turn around and say, well, we got a grant to partially fund this, so that was our reason for doing it. Well, maybe we need to look more closely at what the grant exactly is going to buy us before we proceed. But having said that and expressed that concern, I'll support applying for the money. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions. Move the recommended motion. Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is the Buttertub Sanitary Sewer Upgrade Alignment Study. Mr. Sims, please.
Map just helps, which is appendix to the report, two pages in. So the Buttertub sewer drains an area, since it provides sanitary sewer drainage for an area, essentially from the Nanaimo Aquatic Center south through to VIU. So there's quite a land area that drains through, and it goes around the perimeter of Buttertub's marsh, and in some cases the sewer line is underneath the marsh itself. So it is currently getting very close to its capacity, which means it's at risk of an overflow. And as we see this area build out, for example, the
If you could take a minute, Mr. Sims, until we can just get the screen up.
There we go. As an example,
thank you.
So you can see the sewer is highlighted there, running between 3rd Street and Buttertub's Drive. The large white area is Buttertub's Marsh. And as it's partially, it follows the trail, but the trail is upland in the dry area. The sewer is actually down slope and in the wetted area of the marsh. So as noted, VIU is immediately south. The Nanaimo Ice Center is immediately south of this area. And as I say, at the time it was put in, in the 70s or early 80s, this was not envisioned to have as much growth as we're seeing today and as we're anticipating in the future. So the sewer is getting close to its capacity and risk of an overflow, which would not be a good thing. Given its proximity to the marsh and the challenges with, normally replacing a sewer, you would just replace it online and put in a larger pipe in general. In this case, it would be quite challenging to do so immediately under the water, under the edge of the marsh. The funding that staff is requesting is really to do a full-scale analysis of what other options exist. So we need to consider geotechnical and environmental impacts. So that's the intent of the funding. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Gesselbrock, Turley, and Martman. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess this is the study to look at all the options. I was just curious, are completely other alignments on the table in these studies?
Absolutely, Your Worship. We've considered, going other ways, but there's costs to, what would the cost be for a project of replacing the pipe along its existing alignment? How could that be done feasibly with minimal impact is one question. And then that's going to have a certain financial cost as well as an environmental, perhaps a geotechnical cost. Are there other alignments? Can we pump it out of the area to another, similar to what we did with Park and 7th? So that's another option. Can we drill a pipe underneath the marsh and have it, bypassed entirely. That sort of, those are the options that we want to ensure before we put a project together in the budget, so we know what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you to Mr. Sims. I just want to confirm the actual area. We mentioned the Nanaimo Center and VIU, and I'm assuming College Heights because I saw that mentioned here, and also new development up on College Heights. And how far to the west would it go? Like, would it catch Calder Road and areas like that, or is that on a separate trunk?
It's a good question. Thanks, Your Worship. I think the College Heights area, my recollection is that it does drain further west to another lateral that crosses even west of the Parkway. It comes down Addison Road and wiggles through. No, is that, am I? Yeah, okay. Sorry, Mr. Rosen's just confirmed that the lateral does in fact drain most of College Heights. And I was hesitating there and I thought, no, it does come this way after it drops down Addison Road. So from Calder over, I believe it is where it goes to another lateral sewer. But
okay, so basically the new developments happening up in that area is not going to be impacted by the one under Butter Tubs. It goes elsewhere.
If it's west of Calder, correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And I'd actually like to move the recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Brown.
And just to speak to it, Butter Tubs has got to be one of the jewels in our city. Absolutely love Butter Tubs. And I'm thinking with climate change and everything else, whatever we can do to protect this and do it the right way. I hate expenditures on studies, but I think this one is absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Very good. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Another one for Mr. Sims, the budget transfer disclosure, Kenwell, 9th and Laguna. Mr. Sims, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. This is really an information report required by council policy that we let you know when we've moved funds around greater than $100,000. So within our project plan, these particular projects came in. There's a summary report or a summary table that shows the overages on the compared to the budget. However, funding was available within the project plan for 2022, and all three were utility projects. So this was not out of unexpected, I should say. Be happy to take any questions on any of the projects.
I'm not seeing any questions, Mr. Sims. Report's pretty clear. All right. Thank you very much. The next is the Officer Designation and Delegation of Authority Bylaw and Appeals Procedure Bylaw. Ms. Robertson, one of those complex things that you'll lead us through, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As part of the bylaw renewal project, I was asked to review this bylaw, and on July 4th, I advised council that I would be bringing it forward to this meeting. And so before I get into reviewing the bylaw, I just thought it was worthwhile just to briefly explain what the intent of a delegation bylaw is. And through the authority of the community charter, council can delegate some of their powers, duties, and functions to either a committee or to an employee or officer or to another body that's established by council. And this delegation allows that delegated person or body to conduct detailed and focused consideration of the operation and administration of a service or function. And this sort of allows council to focus on the broader picture while empowering staff to deal with the more routine responsibilities of council. So the authority by council to delegate is also balanced with that accountability to the public by having some specific limitations on that delegation, and in some cases, particularly when someone's rights might be affected, the ability to have those staff decisions reconsidered by council. And so that would be the part 2 focus to my report, which is the appeals bylaw. So council currently has an officer appointment and delegation of authority bylaw, but there are a few reasons why the bylaw needed to be reviewed. And the first is that the bylaw is 16 years old, and most of the delegated authority in it relates to land use matters. And those provisions point to outdated references in the Local Government Act. And as council is likely aware, there was a significant overhaul to the Local Government Act. So every time one looked to that bylaw, every section that it pointed to was inaccurate. And that made it challenging for council staff and the public to actually understand what sections were pertinent to them. The second reason is that clarity was needed as to what types of agreements and permits staff would have the authority to sign off on versus the ones that should be really considered by council. And where it gets a bit fuzzy is there's a number of regulatory bylaws where staff have been delegated the authority to have basic general administration of the bylaw, but there's all the pieces underneath that means that there is a need to sign off on permits or agreements as part of administration of that bylaw. So you know, for example, with the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Regulation bylaw, but we're challenged sometimes as to how to interpret that fine line. So one of the examples that I cited in my report was facility use agreements. There are approximately 5,000 of these agreements signed off by staff every year, and most are for short-term facility rentals, gym rentals, birthday parties, floor hockey, etc. And so one would assume that signing off on those would be done by staff. It would completely bog council down to bring all those agreements to council to sign off on. But there are also facility use agreements, which are higher level documents, often multi-years, and those are the ones that should come to council. So how do we make that determination? And that was sort of the intent as part of this bylaw review. So to make the distinction clearer, the bylaw has some new provisions that provide that clarity, and then that way, outside of what's specifically identified in the bylaw, would need to come to council then. So in the example I just referenced, we divided it up as such where the facility use agreements were broken into two categories. Short-term ones that are under 1 year would be signed off by staff, and higher level facility use agreements for multiple years would be coming to council. The third reason for bringing the bylaw forward is that nowhere did we have a comprehensive listing of what bylaw staff actually had delegated authority on. That was an exercise in itself. And the original thought when I commenced with the project is to move all of those delegated authorities in one comprehensive bylaw like we're doing with the fees and charges. But there were 37 bylaws that have different pieces of delegated authority. And it is best practice when we compared with other municipalities and easier to just keep that delegated authority for the most part with the subject matter. This is what I would like to call the mother officer bylaw, where everything else that doesn't fit specifically has a home. So instead, what we did is developed an information schedule that provides a listing of every bylaw where there is delegated authority that have been provided to staff, what authority has been granted, and what who that staff person is. And then I've embedded hyperlinks into each of that schedule, so it's very, very easy to just quickly go to that spot. So that schedule is an information document. Even though it's attached to the bylaw, it doesn't affect the bylaw, so it can change over time as bylaws change. And then finally, we were looking at opportunities for improvements. To cite one example from the report, you frequently see appointment of bylaw enforcement officers. That's something that can routinely be done by Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Rudolph, as opposed to continually formally bringing the report. But because the authority we've cited is under the Police Act, it states specifically council has to, but there are now provisions in the charter that would allow staff to do that. So I did outline only stuff that was new in my staff report, but I'm very happy to walk council through the report sort of generally, if you like, to go over what is unchanged and what is new, or I'm happy to respond to questions either way.
My preference, if you could, we're making good time this morning, if you could walk us through.
Okay, sounds good.
Please.
And we'll deal with the appeals procedure bylaw as the part two, so we'll deal with this one first. Okay, so page 204 on your agenda is where you can find the bylaw. And outside, like, the title, scope, and interpretation, schedules, and definitions, those are pretty standard things. the meat of the bylaw starts in section 6, which is the statutory officers. And there is absolutely nothing that has changed in the report. This is exactly as is in our existing bylaw. So there is nothing changed at all. No officers are being added or deleted. Section 7, that has changed somewhat in terms of the wording. Under our existing bylaw, it references deputies. So those who've been appointed deputies can act on the officer's absence. So for myself, I'm acting as corporate officer today. So when a deputy, those rights are automatically transferred over. However, when there isn't a specified deputy, our existing bylaw has a little clause in there that says the existing bylaw references deputies or delegates who have been appointed to act in the delegate's place from time to time. And I think there was a bit of misunderstanding about the appoint part. That specifically has to be done by council. So we just worded the bylaw so that it's a little bit clearer that unless you are a deputy, you have to be named within the bylaw. So you'll see throughout that there is some additional staff members that have been added because unless they're noted, we would have to come back to council to actually get a formal motion to have that person act in their behalf. Section 8, there is no change. Section 9 is a new section. And it's on the administrative side. It relates to notices. And in the legislation, council actually has the responsibility to put out the notices. Well, that's administratively done by staff. And typically it's the corporate officer who does that as part of their functional responsibility. But given the city's size, there are other departments and other staff members who just oversee that. For example, Ms. Mercer's group in finance looks after advertising for permissive tax exemptions. Mr. Corson looks after real estate transactions. So this really just identifies which staff person is the person responsible for overseeing the legislative requirement.
Councillor Bonner has a question.
Thank you, Worship. And this is just a little question, right? It was just in the definitions here. The term director, maybe it's just me reading it or not understanding it. A director means an employee of the city fulfilling the function of the director of a specific operation, function area, and or program of the city. So it's kind of like saying a director is a director, but it doesn't say what a director is. Am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, I got this definition from Human Resources, and there's director positions and then there's general manager's positions. So we just wanted to make sure that there was,
so
the director is an employee fulfilling the function of a specific operational or program
we have,
of the city.
You know, farther down, we have the Director of Development Services. So it's referring to that director, I guess.
Yeah, so there's some that might, gosh, it's just the definition of director.
Yeah,
I'd have to look back on that, sorry.
Okay, all right, I'll do that, yeah, no problem. I was just curious.
Like, is it in terms of something specific where it's mentioned in the bylaw that it's causing some?
No, it's just that it basically says a director is a director. Yes. Yeah, what is a director?
Okay, well, let's park that one for a minute, okay?
Your Worship, through you. Hi, good morning. Hi, and good morning. It's also noted, for example, my position and Ms. Mercer's position are both noted as directors. So I think it's to give a definition to director for us as well as Mr. Holm, for example, who will be noted later in the bylaw under permit approvals, etc. So I think it's just giving the position director a definition, as Ms. Robertson was saying.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Carry on, Ms. Robertson.
Thank you. Under Personnel Administration and Appointments, Section 10.1A is new. It just currently, Mr. Lindsay is the Deputy CAO, but at times both him and Mr. Rodolph might be absent. So this just gives clarity that the CAO has the ability to appoint another member of the senior leadership team to act when they're both gone. Item B, there is no change. This is previously Section 5.2 in the existing bylaw. Item C is new, and this would give the CAO the ability to appoint this position. Again, not unlike a bylaw enforcement officer, this would just give Mr. Rudolph the ability to appoint an approving officer, as opposed to coming directly to council. Item D, there is no change. It's under 5.2 of the existing bylaw. Item E, right now we actually have a resolution on the books that appoints Mr. Rudolph as the corporate officer for recording minutes, and that's when it's legislatively either Ms. Gorey or myself have to be in attendance of the meeting, and if not, then you actually have to have somebody appointed. So this is something that you would typically find in a delegation bylaw. So that has been added. Section 10.2, this is new. It just basically highlights, as the past practice has always been, that the Director of Legislative Services or the corporate officer is given the responsibility for overseeing the civic election every 4 years. Item 11, this is the agreements miscellaneous section. Item 11.1, and this is new, and it basically authorizes the Director of Finance to sign off on agreements associated with grant applications for council-approved projects. So it's not, it's always something that would have come to council. It's just the after piece. 11.2 is new, and then just from time to time, there's information sharing between directors of IT. It's just formalizing that it's that they have the ability to be able to enter into and execute those types of agreements for information sharing. 11.3 is no change. This is something that currently happens right now. It's under Section 6 of the existing bylaw. Section 12.1, there is no change. That is currently under Section 11. Section 13, this is a new section, and right now the Municipal Insurance Association oversees claims related to bodily injury, personal injury, and property damage liability. And for claims outside this scope, staff is looking to give the CAO the authority to settle uninsured claims of not more than $100,000. And in cases where that would be used would be for breaches of contracts. And if council had any questions on that, I believe Ms. Gorey might be able to respond. Section 14, this is the piece I spoke about that would give the authority to the General Manager of Development Services and CAO the ability to appoint by law enforcement officers. Section 15.1, this is new and would give Mr. Corson the ability to proceed with acquiring land or interests up to $75,000. So funds would have to be in the budget and also a council-approved project. So an example of where this would be used is the Albert Street bike lane or Metro Drive, where you're needing to negotiate with property owners for acquiring portions of little sliver on the piece of their front area. And so rather than having to go back to council for that, it's already an approved project. This just gives him up to $75,000. Beyond that, it would need to come to council. Section 16.1, this is mostly no change as it's covered under 6 of the existing bylaw. However, it does provide the power over to the approving officer as opposed to the General Manager of Development Services and Director of Legislative Services. They're actually the person that has to sort of approve it for us to sign off on it anyway. So they have a fairly autonomous role, the approving officer, so it makes sense that they would be the ones that would sign off on it. 17.1 remains unchanged. That's currently in Section 6 of the existing bylaw. Section 18.1, discharge of obsolete charges. This is just new in terms of who would sign off. So currently it's the Director of Legislative Services and the General Manager of Development Services have that delegated authority. However, it's more appropriate for the approving officer to release these given they have the tools, resources, and knowledge to make the decision. And again, they have to approve it anyways before it comes to Legislative Services. Section 19.1, this is a new section, and it would be used when someone is building a retaining wall or puts in landscaping or fencing in a road right-of-way. Depending on its location, if it's in a high visible area, staff would be given the authority to deny it, or if it's an obscure area that it's not going to affect much, we would look to ask them to sign an agreement, and if it's approved, it would be conditional on them providing proof of insurance, and also an understanding that it's not a long-term right to them. 20.1, this is a new section, and these are those short-term facility rental agreements that I spoke about. Typically a few hours or a few days. Examples are the pool rentals and gyms and birthday parties. And the higher level facility use agreements, and such as the one with the Nanaimo Clippers, those are the ones that would come forward to council for approval. And that is the major distinction there. Section 20.2, which is licenses of agreements of city-owned park land. And this would give the general manager of Parks, Recreation, and Culture the ability to enter into these license of use agreements up to a market value rent of $50,000. Some of the examples of these types of agreements would be the soccer club renting the sports pavilion at Bevan Park, the Nanaimo BMX Association, and vending services at the Frank Crane Arena. There are approximately 40 of these agreements signed off by staff each year. And having this highlighted in the bylaw would provide clarity that staff do have the delegated authority to sign. Item B is new, and it's the same thing. It would be for these types of agreements over with a little bit of a higher threshold for up to $250,000. Anything above that would come to council for approval. Section 20.3, which is license of use agreements for municipal land. This is similar in that Mr. Corson would have the ability, as it relates to the lands as opposed to parks. So these agreements give the entity the use of city property where the use is not exclusive, which I just described. So there's the ones for parks, and this is for the remaining land. These are documents that are not registered at land titles, and there's often a short 30-day cancellation clause. And most are nonprofit and under 5,000. And an example of one is such as a tourism office on Northfield Road. Section 20.4, which would be assignment of leases or licenses for park spaces. And this section would be to assign or lease or license for municipal land other than park spaces when an occupier changes. So if a lease or a license has been approved, but the person that's conducting the business just changes hands, it would just stay the same. Any of the terms would always come back to council. And same for 20.5. This would be for Mr. Corson for municipal land other than park spaces. Section 20.6, this is new, and this is an example of the types of agreements when the city granted an agreement to a film company to use One Port Drive for the temporary storage of trailers and set materials. .7 is our special events permits. Now, in speaking with Mr. Lindsay, he took out the complete section that used to be in called temporary use permits. Those are fairly high-level documents that he would like to have come to council. So he did not want to continue with the temporary use permits being delegated to staff, particularly because they've also increased the time limit. They used to be for 2 years with a renewal of a 2-year option, and I believe they've gone to 3 and 3, which is fairly significant. But along those lines, for things like special events permits, up to 14 days, that's the kind of thing that could be easily delegated to staff. The following documents that would continue to go to council for approval in all cases would be co-management agreements. And these are the types of agreements where the city owns the property and the operator undertakes responsibility for operation and maintenance of the property for its use. Some examples include the Nanaimo Search and Rescue, Nanaimo and District Track and Field Club, and also leases. Leases are documents that give exclusive possession to an entity to operate their business, and they're typically longer in tenure. Examples like Loaves and Fishes at East Wellington and Nanaimo Yacht Club, those ones would continue to come to council. Section 21 is the land use approvals, and that's the section that I pointed out that it's currently in section 6 of our bylaw, but we just got all the provisions updated, so it points to the new pieces of the legislation. Same with section 22 for development permits. Again, that's in our existing bylaw, but we've expanded to include Mr. Holm as well, so that he can act in Mr. Lindsay's absence to be able to sign off on those specific types of development permits. Then we jump to section 23. There is no change. That is currently under section 9 of the bylaw. And notices on title all we've done here is updated the sections to the Local Government Act, and that's it.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the clock and thinking there's no scheduled break this morning. This is probably an appropriate time. I'm wondering, though, if we should just pass the first recommended motion relating to this particular section. Oh, sorry, Councillors Thorpe and then Bonner.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Robertson, and thanks to the Mayor for asking you to walk us through that. I've learned recently that it pays to read bylaws very carefully. And so I did look through this last night, and this is an important bylaw, and to me it goes to the balancing act that Council always faces between operational authority, where we put trust in our staff, which I absolutely have, balanced with the oversight responsibility that Council has as its role. So my general question is this, beyond thanking you for your work, I'm always interested in best practice. Did you consult other jurisdictions on their policies, and are we following what other municipalities do, just so our viewers or listeners know that this is not something that we're doing on our own, it's considered basically best practice?
Yeah, we probably looked at, oh my gosh, probably 15 different types of bylaws. And some, you know, they put them out in certain ways and in certain groups. We wanted to adjust this a little bit. This particular bylaw sample was taken off of one that was developed by the law firm from a senior partner. So I felt fairly confident. It was done not that long ago. And so many of the clauses, the way they were worded, were based on that bylaw. And it also had a full vetting by our existing legal counsel as well. So.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. When I was reviewing this bylaw, it looked to me that this is a transition from a small city to a large city, where many of these things can be delegated to staff, and I echo Councillor Thorpe's comments there as staff that we can certainly trust to do this. I do have a little question. I promised there wouldn't be too many, but it was a little one. It's regarding 15.1. And that's specifically interest of land up to 75,000 that can be just bought. My question is sometimes when we're doing these road right-of-ways and we need to grab 3 feet of somebody's property, if that person tells us they're not interested in selling, then we have to expropriate it. So would the expropriation part have to come back to council? Right.
Mr.
Yes, it would. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Bonner. Yes, an expropriation requires to be done through council, so that can be delegated.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just curious about that one little point. And like, again, this shows that we are becoming a larger city. We're no longer. I quite enjoyed reading over the old bylaws that we just got rid of recently. We're no longer setting the limit of size of a bottle of milk and things like that. So. I'm glad that this is coming forward, and thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmens, you're moving the recommended motion. Oh, pardon me, we're going to have to go through it. So you can read the first motion.
Thank you. So I would move that Officer Designation and Delegation of Authority Bylaw 2022, number 7353, a bylaw to provide for the appointment of officers and the delegation of authority, be given first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. I would move that Officer Designation and Delegation of Authority Bylaw 2022, number 7353, be given second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And I would move that Officer Designation and Delegation of Authority Bylaw 2022, number 7353, be given third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break, give staff a bit of a rest, and then reconvene. Thank you. To say nothing of a stretch. Oh. Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in. It just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Oh, yeah, buddy! Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, down in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification.
And Ms. Robertson, back to you again.
Thank you. So as noted just prior to the break, there are some decisions by staff when they're delegated to them where reconsideration provision should be granted. So this typically happens when staff are making the significant decisions that may impact an individual's rights in a significant way. And some reconsideration provisions are mandated by legislation, such as the business license inspector, someone who may have their business license suspended or proposed to be counseled would have the opportunity for a hearing before council. Others are contained within the city's regulatory bylaws. So, for example, the officer's designation and delegation bylaw has that section about development permits. Those should have the opportunity to be reconsidered by council should a decision be made to deny a DP because it's affecting someone's property rights. Regardless of whether the reconsideration is mandated by statute or through a regulatory bylaw, the procedures for conducting those reconsideration hearings must be done by bylaw. And again, this was an opportunity to provide some consistency. Quite a number of them actually will have a little paragraph outlined within the bylaw that talks about the reconsideration process. And some, as in our business license bylaw, are very robust and very detailed and very clear. There are others that are extremely vague. So we wanted, again, to pull it all together and have one specific process that was understandable, in a one-stop shop, and everybody knows what that reconsideration process would look like. So developed the appeals procedure bylaw, and the procedures within it are fairly standard. It gives the opportunity for the person to make the reconsideration to council, and they would simply be putting their request in writing and providing any supporting materials that they would like to have considered by council as to why they believe the decision of staff to be overturned. They would also have the right to have legal counsel if they wanted, if it was a significant enough matter, as well as the city would have the opportunity to do the same. So once the package is put together, the Director of Legislative Services would put it on an open meeting, and the matter would be considered by council. And basically at the end of it, council's decision would be final. So it could either be to support the decision of staff, or it could be to overturn it, or there is even the possibility for there to be perhaps a blending of the two. So council would be perfectly within their rights to treat it in any manner. But once that decision is made, it does become final. So we also wanted to identify the bylaws where reconsideration provisions were highlighted. So on Schedule A, we've noted the standard statutory ones, which are business license bylaw and the chauffeur's regulation. But some of the others through regulatory bylaws, which are flood prevention and intercommunity business license bylaw, management and protection of trees, aspects to the officer designation and delegation bylaw, property maintenance, and a couple of ones that didn't have provisions, and I consulted with the general manager of engineering and public works. When I was talking about it, I said, you have delegated authority to cut off someone's sewer or water connections. And I said, how often has this happened? And is it something you would bring to council? Because right now he's got full autonomy. And he said he would never do that without bringing that forward to council. So we thought this is probably good ones to be putting in the bylaw itself. For the most part, we wanted to provide some consistency as well, because some said 30 days, some said 30 business days, some say 14. So I did an analysis on them, and we did identify that there were 3 bylaws in particular where time is really of the essence: the flood protection bylaw, aspects to the property maintenance bylaw, because there's already a notice that gets sent where the person has a certain number of days to respond, and then if you were to add another 30, that would be quite a lengthy period of time. So anywhere where there it's 14 days, it's been identified in Schedule A, and that would be the one-stop appeal process should council support the bylaw.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. Any questions? Not seeing any. Councillor Hemmens, please.
I would move that Appeals Procedure Bylaw 2022, number 7354, a bylaw to establish the procedure for hearing appeals, be given first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
I move that Appeals Procedure Bylaw 2022, number 7354, be given second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And I move that Appeals Procedure Bylaw 2022, number 7354, be given third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Ms. Robertson?
Just the last piece to that I wanted to mention is that now all those bylaws just need to have amendments, housekeeping amendments done to them that would point to this appeals bylaw. So either next meeting or the one following that, I would just bring forward the housekeeping amendments to do that process.
Okay. Thank you, and if I can just conclude this section by saying thank you very much. I know it's a massive job, and you've undertaken several of them during your time back here at the city, so it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next are bylaws. 11A, Subdivision Control Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 3260.07. Councillor Martman. Pardon me, Hemmens.
Thank you. I move
Got Martman on my mind. What can I say?
I move that Subdivision Control Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 3260.07, to remove Schedules G and H, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. 11B, Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 4500.192. Councillor Hemmens.
I move that Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 4500.192, to rezone 6004 Nelson Road from single-dwelling residential R1 to low-density residential R6 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Hemmens.
I move that Building Bylaw Amendment 2022, number 7224.04, a bylaw to update the reference to the fees and charges bylaw, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Hemmens.
I move that Fees and Charges Bylaw 2022, number 7336.03, to include development services fees within the Fees and Charges bylaw, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And I move that Development Approvals, Procedures, and Notification Bylaw Amendment 2022, number 7356, to update the reference to the Fees and Charges bylaw, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Notice of Motion. And we have none. The next is Other Business. Councillor Armstrong, Boxwood Road Walkway.
Before. If I can just move the motion, then I'll
Yes.
speak to it.
And seconded Councillor Thorpe. Please, Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, this is going back to what Councillor Thorpe said earlier. I heard from so many businesses and people in the area about the concerns about that area and how the walkway went in, and the fact that it became a bicycle lane, even though the direction was to put it a pedestrian walkway. So I would just like more information to come back to council so we can make a better determination on it. And my final point is, yesterday I was down there again, and I watched big trucks and littler trucks going right down through the separated lane. So I think it's very dangerous the way it's set up, and I'd like to get more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sims, you could offer some commentary here, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have just a map that we can pull up as context, and then I'll ask Mr. Rosen to provide a little bit of history. So this really, the map is sort of an adaptation from city plan from recently adopted, and it's essentially showing in the red lines the primary active transportation corridors, and in the blue lines, darker blue, is the secondary active transportation corridors. This was developed from the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan, and it's extended to city plan as well. But just on some councillor suggestions, we provide some history, how we got here, and happy to answer questions beyond that, but Mr. Rosen will provide that. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner, did you want to ask a question now, or?
No.
Okay. Councillor Brown now?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sims, I understand that work has been modified in conjunction with consultation and feedback from some of the property owners. I was just curious, what is our notification process prior to the work commencing? I understand this was sort of delayed by COVID, but I was just curious on what actually transpired with respect to property owners receiving notification of the forthcoming works.
I think that was one of the hindsights that we could have done better with. It was a project that was a couple of years in the making. Once the parking was removed to allow for it, it kind of hung there for a while, and then we showed up with the modifications. So, as I say, in hindsight, could have been a little bit more consultation in advance. I believe it happened as it was happening, as opposed to sort of an advance warning.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'm just trying to piece it all together for what I've been hearing and how it transpired, so thank you.
Councillor Hemmens, then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for the question. I had a similar one. Regarding 1C in this proposed motion, so consult with the cyclist community, truck drivers, WorkSafe, ICBC, RCMP, traffic services, and the city's liability insurance. How long do you think that would take staff? That's a pretty in-depth engagement process on something that exists in our plans. What would that look like, and what would be delayed as a result of doing that?
I think this kind of gets to one of staff's questions as well, is, how do we approach, where do we go from here? And I think if I could ask just Mr. Rosen to provide a bit of history, but I think reading the motion we've got some physical infrastructure in place. It's not complete because we paused it while we were having this consideration. So if we pause it, and then for some sort of further engagement, what do we do in the interim? We have to make it safe, obviously. And so that may include some form of completion or not. But maybe just, if council permits, we could ask Mr. Rosen just to step through a little bit of the history, just so we're fresh on that, and then take the conversation from there.
Councillor Bonner, do you want to ask your question now or later? Okay, don't worry, you'll have opportunity. Mr. Rosen, please, good morning.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. At the risk of being a bit repetitive, because I was here a couple of weeks ago talking to Council a little bit about some of the background, I'll just recap some of the more salient aspects of this particular project. So the Boxwood Industrial Area has been under development for several decades. For the first, the majority of the development, it was actually not a requirement to install sidewalks. That was implemented as a cost savings measure. However, given the land uses that have evolved over the years, there's been quite a bit of pressure on the city to find a way to accommodate these active transportation users of the area. And so when the pandemic first hit, staff came forward with some options for council to implement some sort of quick wins here. And so the idea was put forward to implement a pedestrian-oriented facility on the side of the road. Now, part of that was, or just sort of backing up there a little bit, the Nanaimo Transportation Master Plan also includes the Boxwood Corridor as a sort of an off-Bowen bikeway sort of cycling corridor, because there aren't a lot of options on the west, sort of north-south side of the city. And that's also reflected in the new city plan as an active transportation corridor. So when staff were doing the design work to implement this pedestrian-oriented facility on the road, as we got into the details, it became apparent that the stretch north of Tulsa was problematic from a width standpoint, and there was an opportunity, if we were to provide some sort of safety barrier, to introduce two-way cycling on this facility, which was essentially the same size anyway. And so we took the initiative to move forward with the implementation of that. At the time, there wasn't much of an opportunity to complete detailed consultation. However, since the initial installation, we have done we've met with a number of businesses that have had sort of concerns with their access and so on, and we've accommodated all those concerns now. All those barriers that were causing them issues have been removed and adjusted, and as far as we know, there's no business that still has access issues with what's out there presently. We've been in conversation with Municipal Insurance Agency. They don't see it as a liability issue. They see it more as an issue of relationship with the city and the adjacent properties or the businesses. We're in discussion with ICBC. We haven't had any sort of feedback from them yet, but we expect that to occur probably within a week or two. The project is actually not complete right now. We're a little bit concerned about it in the current state. We still have to put some bollards up, some flexible bollards up to delineate the facility, as well as some green paint on some of the crossings. So we still need to do some work to make it safe. So however council votes on this, depending on the timeline of how long it's going to take to take that action, we would still have to do something to sort of make it safe. In terms of the motion, I think staff are wanting a little bit of clarity in terms of, because the motion actually speaks to staff taking action in terms of removing the barrier and implementing the pedestrian-oriented walkway, but then also it talks about consultation. Normally we would undertake consultation before we take action. So I think we're just seeking some clarity on whether council wants us to undertake consultation and report back for a decision, or to actually take action, and the consultation would be more about information. Just seeking some clarity on that as part of the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosen. Councillor Armstrong, and then Councillor Hemmons.
One of the points behind this was the consultation, in my opinion, should have done first.
I mean, sorry.
Pardon?
I'm going to blame it on the flu shot the other day. I'm still a bit foggy. In order, you and then Councillor Martman, not Hemmons.
Okay. So one of the issues I have is we have an opportunity to put this in properly, in my opinion, and more safely. We're presently tearing up behind Boxwood, putting in the water main. We have an opportunity to put that in there where nobody's affected and it's safer for all modes of transportation. So that's one of my big concerns. Yes, it's more money, but that's a decision that a council should make, not staff. My other concern is, I don't know if you've been down there recently, but right now the lanes are blocked in 3 spots because people have big bins blocking the area so that they can actually work. I still have been getting emails from businesses that they're not happy. As I said yesterday, I was down there and I've been watching vehicles actually drive between the barricaded area and the roadway. So it's now 2 lanes of traffic going one direction, which is very concerning. So either we're going to have to block it so vehicles can't go down there, or do something about that. It's extremely dangerous. And my other point is, and I've said this from day one, most of your cyclists' fatalities come when they're hit by big trucks. This is an industrial area. It's a zoned industrial area. And for me, the logical thing to do is put the bike lane and the pedestrian walkway behind where we're presently doing the work. So, and I won't talk anymore on it. I've talked a lot on it, and I'll just wait for the vote. Thank you.
And Councillor Martman, Bonner, and Brown in order.
Thank you. I'd actually like to move an amendment to this motion When it comes to the consultation, the city's liability insurer, MIABC, in my professional experience, insurance companies do not comment on the hypothetical. There is no, unless there is absolute negligence by the city and the staff, which I doubt there would be, I don't understand why we're looking to consult with them. So I would ask that the city's liability insurer, MIABC, be removed from C.
Councillor Martman, before I ask for a seconder, I've got so many councillors wishing to speak to this. Before we get into the wording the motion, would you mind holding off on that just
sure,
so I can get a better feel for what council's concerns are?
Okay.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate that very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to vote in favor of this motion, even if there was an amendment to it, unless the amendment was to get rid of it completely. I don't think it's, with all due respect to the person who put it, I don't think it's well thought out here. We've already been told that 1A has already been done. And as for 1B, this particular piece of infrastructure that's been put on is used by multiple people using multiple modes of transportation. I even drove down there on my bike one day, and there was a lady pushing her children in a cart for kids with groceries. So she's obviously come from the grocery store, and that is the best way for her to get back to her house. Her choice. And this is all about giving people the choice to use the method of transportation that they feel that they want to use, and it's up to our response to make sure that they can do it safely. So in terms of, and C, I don't agree with that because I don't think there's really a formal cyclist community. Like, what do we do? Just gonna walk around, grab a cyclist and ask them sort of questions? I also don't think there's a formal, in Nanaimo, truck drivers organization. So, and I don't know what WorkSafe BC has to do with anything this, or ICB for that matter. And especially MIABC. The second part of this is, to me, is a suggestion by people who don't use bikes as transportation. And the reason I have a problem with number 2 is if we are to make cycling as one of the modes of transportation, the active transportation thing, used throughout the city of Nanaimo, we have to make safe corridors for people to get on their bikes to go someplace. Not to go for a lovely bike ride down the ENN trail or out on the other trails. For people to get from point A to point B, to buy groceries, see a doctor, take their kids to school, that sort of thing. We can't be building bike lanes that go in the middle of nowhere and have no connection whatsoever to the things that people need to get to. So that's why I have a problem with this part 2 on this. We need to build active transportation routes that connect people from their homes to the places they need to go. There's lots of trails in our city for people to go on bike rides, and they do that all the time. But this, to me, is not a well thought out motion, and I don't agree with any of the points on this thing. I believe that this thing is a work in progress, which is fine, and having seen the work originally go in and the changes take place almost daily, which I thought was a bit weird, that is obviously because staff has been consulting with the businesses in the neighborhood. And let's make one point clear. This thing was a mistake when it was made. It should have had the routes put in there for the active transportation, but all the residential that is on the west of it wasn't in there at the time. So that has all been added in, and people are choosing that route to get to the stores and the other things down the road. So that's why I'm opposed to this particular thing, and I was spoken too long, but that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is the motion on the floor?
No, not yet. Well, no, it wasn't seconded, with great respect.
That's correct. It's been moved but not seconded.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, but I didn't, with great respect, I didn't recognize it as being seconded. If you're telling me you seconded, I appreciate that, but I didn't recognize it as being seconded. You might have recalled that Councillor Martman wanted to move the motion, but with an amendment, I think, is exactly as I understood it. Am I wrong, Ms. Robertson?
Yeah,
no, you're right. The motion has been made. There's a motion to amend.
That's what Councillor Martins was.
So we're not on the, yes, we're on the main motion, but we're not on the proposed amendment. Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I would very much support number 2 of this. I understand there may be some costing things associated with that, but I would be genuinely curious around additional paved walkway there. However, when it comes to the first part of this motion, A, B, and C, I don't support them. I appreciate Mr. Sims acknowledging and being accountable for, hey, maybe we could have been, just the way the timing happened and where we were at with the project, we probably didn't do our due diligence with the property owners as much as they were expecting or expected. I did speak with some that, they said we get lots of mail and whether we got it or not, we missed it and we didn't feel like the city had reached out. And so I think, hey, that's fair. We can accommodate that. However, I do understand also talking to people that the city has retroactively tried to perform changes to accommodate the different concerns, and I really appreciate that. I think that's exactly what we want to do with all types of projects. So, yeah, so, reading 1A, I hope that would continue to happen, especially as concerns get raised, and my expectation is it will. With respect to 1B, I think we need to see a project to completion, and so I feel it's a little bit redundant. And with respect to C, I just don't think this is how we typically or should go about building out some of these projects. There's time and place to account for this in the design, but looking at the list, I sometimes think we want to appeal to organizations that don't necessarily have the expertise to provide this, and I'm not sure what value there would be in a good portion of this list. So I think taken in totality, we've caught people off guard, and that's always a harder position to work from. But despite that, we should probably just finish the project. And, I would support, if there's a review, just a simple review check-in, because there has been so many concerns raised. I think that would be the appropriate thing to do, especially for the type of infrastructure. But other than that, I wouldn't be really open to supporting more. And I think my final comment would be, after all, I called up the mayor and said, hey, I've seen these motions, and he said, yes, there has been some feedback, so I appreciate that. I spent 8 days. I just brought my iPad down there in 8 days and camped out and did some work. I could see some of those concerns, and then I could see the changes happen in real time to address them, and I hope they are a fix that works for everybody. But over that 8 days, I didn't see a ton of cyclists, I didn't see a ton of pedestrians, but I also didn't see a ton of issues. And the ones that were present were being actively worked on. So, I think if we take that mentality and complete the project, and we check in 6 months from now or 12 months from now, and there still is a lot of concerns for the price and the type of material that is being used, it can be rectified or fixed at that time. So I'm supportive of just carrying on as long as we do that check-in. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hemmons, and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't be supporting the motion for a few reasons, and I just want to preface that I'm a rider, I've ridden it, I'm a driver, I've driven it, and I've spoken with a number of the businesses impacted. So, first of all, I think the off-Bowen Bikeway is something that this council has worked towards for a number of years, and this is an important component of it. It's a long-term vision. It's a long-term vision, and this project, this piece of it, isn't yet complete. We know in that area that traffic is increasing dramatically. I was really swayed by the numbers that when we first built that road, it had 900 users. We're now up to 5,000 users, so exponential increase of traffic, so we need to keep everyone on that road safe. And we've got the Boxwood connector coming in, which is going to add to that. So I think where we went wrong, and this is working with the businesses, and I agree with Councillor Brown on this, but what I have seen to date is the city has accepted that and worked with businesses to remediate. I would also support a review at, in some time in the near future, and as well as those businesses staying in touch with staff to make sure that the changes are working as intended. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe, then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support this motion. It goes to my concerns overall about our transportation master plan, which this council has approved and incorporated into our city plan, and that's one of the reasons that I did not support the adoption of the city plan. I think we really need to look carefully at our future of transportation in terms of reality rather than idealistic visions. And that's not to say I'm against bike paths, and I'm certainly not against pedestrian safety, but I asked this before and I didn't push to get an answer, but I don't know how this roadway through a designated industrial park was ever designated with the lovely term multimodal active transportation corridor. To me, it just doesn't make sense to be there. And this project has been started, it's been pushed underway, and Mr. Sims has graciously acknowledged that there wasn't enough consultation done before it started. And now we're being told or suggested respectfully by staff that, well, we can't pause this because it's already underway and it would be unsafe to pause it. Well, I think it's unsafe to start with, and I think we've made a misstep here, and I don't want to see us continue taking missteps. I know that the businesses in this area have signed a petition about the safety that this is the lack of safety that this is causing. And I really feel that we need to put the brakes, no pun intended, put the brakes on this project and look at where any bike path should be located, how we can improve safety for pedestrians without impacting the traffic flow of commercial vehicles along this road and the safety of all people that use this facility. So I'm going to support the motion. I think we need to just put things on pause and have a closer look at what we're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrock, and then Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I appreciate the intent of this motion. However, I think that staff have adequately addressed the concerns raised, and modifications, are being made. And this is an important link for many transportation users, and it needs to be built out that way, especially as usage grows for everyone. I also just want to remark that I would also be interested in entertaining looking at option number 2, or the second part of the motion about looking at options for alternative paved walkway over the Midtown water main project. We're going to be digging up that land anyhow and putting a water main, and I think that's an excellent opportunity to also put some active transportation options over top. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a point of correction, it wasn't this council that adopted the Transportation Master Plan, it was adopted in 2014. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Notwithstanding the fogginess of my brain, I'm going to comment on this in any event. When the barricades were first put in, I had a number of calls from our business people involved in the industrial park expressing extreme concern about this and frustration. Since those initial conversations, candidly, I really haven't heard from any significant number. Indeed, one has called again, and I think that was before the recent work was done in terms of removing some of the barricades. And this points out what is always a concern for me, and it's not a criticism. Various people in the community from time to time self-select, if you will, a champion on council for a particular project, scheme, issue, etc. And that is, that's the nature of politics. You find your advocate and you work with them and you try and ensure that they get the attention of the larger public by bringing it to the attention of council, which is what this motion is doing. That's a good thing. The problem with it is, however, I'm being asked to support a motion which, given the lack of communication I've received since, would indicate to me that we are trying to solve a problem which may in fact either be solved or largely ameliorated or whatever. The other thing that concerns me about this motion, and this goes back to something Councillor Thorpe said earlier this morning, is when we start to dip down or appear to dip down into what are, I would argue, pretty much operational matters, unless it becomes a political crisis, in which case it doesn't matter how operational it is, it gets punted up to council and we have to deal with it. And God forgive me for mentioning this, but Opal Road is a good example. I'm not convinced that this is other than a genuinely operational matter. The transportation plan certainly in place, and we can do our best, but this isn't a situation like the Island Corridor Foundation and the rail line, where it's established and it's a question of maintaining or building on it, and if it disappears, you'll never get it back. We are trying to, I won't say impose, but construct upon existing roadways, traffic patterns, geography, a transportation plan designed to recognize the importance of pedestrians and cyclists and everybody else, and it's not easy. I must admit personally, encouraging pedestrian and cyclist use of an industrial park, which is a very specific land designation as opposed to residential, I think is problematic from the start. And staff, at the direction of council, did the best they could, I think, and as many have acknowledged, and Mr. Sims has, perhaps the consultation was it was, but my inclination, for what it's worth, and I'm not saying this to punt it down the road to another council, but I would be a lot happier voting on this, which, as I say, I think is a largely operational matter, if in fact this motion in its entirety, unamended and unchanged, were deferred for a few weeks to allow staff to provide a more fulsome report than we received this morning that would give us an idea of what consultation has taken place recently, and or more importantly, whether or in fact or not we have businesses and parties impacted by this who think it is still a matter of concern. I'm not interested in creating or imposing a solution where in fact none exists. The last thing you want to be is a solution in search of a problem. And I say this publicly, and I hope, because this is a public meeting, that if there are businesses, users, employees, truckers, cyclists, whoever, who are using that area, and by deferring it, they would be given a few weeks for them to advocate, contact us as politicians and staff to let them know that what's been done to fix the problem has in fact been fixed or hasn't been fixed, and we can come to a more sensible decision. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Bonner in terms of the wording of this motion. I appreciate Councillor Armstrong's efforts and her desire, and the concerns of Councillor Thorpe as well, but I'm not sure this is the motion that would achieve what I will call a just or sensible result, either in terms of the crass politics of this or the practical solution that's needed for the neighborhood. So for what it's worth, I'm going to move a motion that this be deferred to another council meeting, and we can perhaps pick a date if council's got any interest in supporting me on this, with a view to allowing staff to report back, not in a significant way. I'm not asking for the Magna Carta or the Bible here. I'm just asking for this in terms of getting a report from staff, and also, as I say, and again publicly, and I want to emphasize this, if it was important enough to contact mayor and council a few weeks ago, then please let us know now what you're thinking. And if you're not contacting me, your silence I will regard as an answer. Is there a seconder for that rather clumsily worded motion? Councillor Thorpe. And Councillor Turley, you wanted to speak, so please.
Yeah, prior to your deferred motion, but it'll be related somewhat. So I'm allowed to speak? Thank you. So I look at this motion, and I have to admit I struggled long and hard with it, because I'd never like to start something and then without significant reason stop it. However, when I read through the majority of this motion, and it tends to kind of different directions all in one motion, which is a bit confusing. So I can understand Mr. Rosen's concern over what it is we're really asking, but my thought on it is all this motion is doing is confirming what staff are already doing, and which I think is a positive thing. And the other maybe a negative item in there with regard to number 2 is the one that bothers me, because that really I think should be a separate motion because it involves significant financial obligations to get it done. But if the motion was to be presented without a deferment, then I would vote in favor, because I don't see it as being something that is going to stop everything. It's going to continue consultation and working on issues that people have with it. So,
thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Hemmens.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. With respect, I don't support a deferral. Staff have given us, I think, every possible piece of information they have on this. This has been before us twice. This notice of motion has been published for 2 weeks. I'd like to make our decision today. Thank you.
Anything further? Motion to defer. All those in favor? The Mayor and Councillor Thorpe. And those opposed? Councillors Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Brown, Bonner, and Armstrong as well. Thank you. I'd say that motion was defeated. Mr. Sims.
Your Worship, not to add complexity, but just to provide a little bit more context in the discussion on the main motion. This staff are sort of already putting in motion the discussion with the Road Safety Committee that we have with ICBC and RCMP, and so on this particular thing. So we're not viewing this as a done deal. We're still monitoring, and I just wanted to assure Council on that. And on the item number 2, I think Council, if Council wishes to provide that as a second motion, that would be great. We think as time goes on, that particular corridor will naturally evolve as at least a recreational facility. Like if it's a gravel finish, it's a road for our crews to access the water main. It's naturally going to evolve as a recreational facility. The incremental cost would be increasing it as a paved facility, which, you know, again, as Councillor Armstrong points out, is certainly Council's prerogative to think about. The one difference between the two corridors, of course, is that the one along Boxwood, as limited as it is, does provide that sort of local access to what was an industrial park to now is quite a mixed land use. There's commercial and so on and so forth. So that provides local access for the businesses, for residents, etc. And the other one would be more of a commuter route north-south kind of thing. So just perhaps some further context without trying to get in your way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Armstrong. Sorry, your hand was up. Do you want to proceed, Ms. Robertson?
Just based on the conversation, I'm just wondering if you wanted to consider the 2 points seriatim, because there is no add, so they look like they could most definitely be treated two separately. And taking into consideration Councillor Martman's comments, to consider the first motion with removing the words "and the city's liability insurer," and for Council to vote on that one, and then number 2.
Do you wish to proceed with your motion, Councillor Martman, to delete?
I would like to make the amendment before the motion's voted, but I mean, it's just something that insurance companies don't respond to.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Martman's motion?
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing it, Councillor Martman. So we are on the motion. I'm happy to deal with it. Deal with item 1 first as a separate motion, if that's agreeable. All those in favor? Councillors Turley, Thorpe, and Armstrong. Those opposed? Councillors Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Mayor Krogh, Brown, and Bonner. The motion is defeated. On the second motion, if you will, item 2, that Council direct staff to report back, etc. All those, Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. Speaking to the second motion, I do have a problem with the alternative paved. I'm fine with a recreational route on the basically the water line that we're employing in there. And we need more recreational routes in our city. From a personal point of view, I buy supplies from 3 of the places on that road, and 2 are my clients. And I'm not going to drive my truck 6 blocks to go talk to them or buy something when I've got a bike and I just pop down there on my bike. And again, it boils down to, if it's not an alternative, but in addition to, like, I don't mind looking at the idea of putting a pathway down there. I think that's a great idea. But to the extent of not having a path in an area where people need to get to, and in the mode of transportation they choose, I don't think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. Just for clarity and adding on to what Councillor Bonner is saying, I'd like to amend the motion and remove the word "an alternative" and instead of the buffered walkway, so that it reads that council directs staff to report back to council with options for a paved walkway over the Midtown Water Main project next to the Bockwood Road.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Do you wish to speak further to it, Councillor?
Just saying, whenever we're taking up and replacing underground utilities, it's always an important matter of stacking functions and saving costs to look at alternative transportation options on top. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask for an opinion on this because I don't see Councillor Gesselbrock's proposed amendment as an appropriate amendment. It is absolutely changing the intent of the motion by removing the word alternative. So I would ask for an opinion on that. Ms. Robertson, sorry to put you on the spot, but I think Councillor Gesselbrock's motion, I think Councillor Gesselbrock's motion is an absolutely different motion as opposed to simply amending the intent of the motion that's being discussed.
Mr. Sims, does it change it?
Your Worship, I think as we see in City Plan and the Transportation Master Plan, there's 2 parallel routes. And so I think Councillor Thorpe is correct. That would change the intent of the motion as written, but leaving the words "an alternative paved walkway" would imply that then at some point the Boxwood route would be dismissed or removed. So I think that's the concern that Councillor Thorpe's expressing, whereas Councillor Gesselbrock is leading to 2 potential routes, if I understand the discussion correctly.
I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Thorpe on this one. I think it would be better to either defeat or pass this motion with candidly, and then, well, obviously in your case, Councillor Gesselbrock, would be to defeat this motion as it's worded and then proceed with your motion as a new motion. Because it is substantively different. One, you're basically saying take one out of commission, and I think they are substantially different.
With that course of action, and would be happy to vote, opposed to the number 2 that as it's read, and then put forward an alternative motion. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we are on the motion as worded now. All those in favor? Councillors Turley, Thorpe, and Armstrong, and the rest of council, I assume, is opposed. The motion is defeated. Councillor Gesselbrock, if you wish to make your motion now.
Just move that council directs staff to report back to council with options for a paved walkway over the Midtown Water Main project next to Boxwood Road.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Do you wish to speak further to it?
I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a concern with this one because the Councillor Armstrong's motion gave us notice of motion. This one does not, so I can't support it unless we get the required, or at least what I consider appropriate notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
No, it's
no. All right. Mr. Sims, I have a question. In terms of the Midtown Water Main project, where are we at in terms of whether or not a staff report, if we do it now in the near future as opposed to 6 months or a year down the road, where are we in the terms of this project?
Your Worship, we have enough time to consider it. It'll be several months before there's restoration along the parkway in this location. So there's no urgency to the report, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, I will.
Yes, Councillor Thorpe.
Sorry, Your Worship. Yes, I will just comment that I wouldn't support this motion because I find this very confusing. Council has just turned down Councillor Armstrong's suggestion to look at this possible route as an alternative for a paved pathway. And now we're suggesting that we support proceeding with investigating this as another paved pathway. It could have been a viable alternative which would assuage the concerns that we've been discussing. So I find Council's position on this very baffling. We're turning down a proposed solution from Councillor Armstrong regarding this location and then saying, oh no, well, let's have a pathway on here as well. So I can't support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I too am slightly confused. And I was prepared to actually support the motion, the one that was originally presented in the report. However, I don't think I'm prepared to support either now. We have an adopted transportation master plan, and this isn't an identified route. I get that something emerged, but we have a plan that would actually add the connectivity to the area. And so the area in question overall, very close to this and on the other side of the parkway. So I think we're asking staff to go scope out a piece of work for something that wasn't contemplated in the transportation master plan. We have limited resources, we have limited staffing resources, a whole bunch of other projects I would, even if it's just a couple hours, would rather see them working on. So I just think we're going down a wrong path here because something, hey, popped up, it looks okay, maybe it's worth exploring. But it is would be a deviation from our plan. And in this case, I see no justified reason why to follow that shiny object. So I am going to vote in opposition. Thank you.
Thank Mr. Rosen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide a little bit more information on that potential opportunity. In the report that we had a couple of weeks ago, we did actually allude to it, and we had identified that the incremental cost to build a paved trail that would be suitable for commuters with lighting and so on would be between $1 and $1.5 million over and above whatever else the restoration costs would be for the water supply pipeline. Now, keep in mind the water supply pipeline is intended to build like a gravel access road that could be potentially used for some people that are willing to use like a gravel trail and so on. So it will have some value. Staff have already been, once the alignment for the water supply pipeline was identified, staff have been looking at that as a potential opportunity as a transportation corridor. And there definitely is some opportunity and some value to it from the perspective of commuters. And depending on which pieces of it are completed, it has more or less value. So once the entire alignment is completed, it has potentially quite a bit of value to go essentially all the way to VIU. What it lacks is that end of trip access that the actual facility on Boxwood provides to those local businesses and properties and so on. There's really two user groups here. There's the commuter groups, and then there's the groups that are looking for local access. So it'll be quite a while before that water supply pipeline has essentially completed and the restoration is complete. So there'll be quite a bit of time before council really needs to make a decision on this, and it can be done, to be honest, after it's even restored. It's not urgent that it's done right now. So just a little bit more context for council to help with the decision there.
Thank you very much. Councillors Martman, Gesselbrock, and Bonner in order.
Thank you. Then further to Mr. Rosens, I will support the motion, and the reason I will is this is to direct staff to report back to council on what it would look like if we had this paved walkway built and what the cost would be while we're already doing a water main project. So I think with the report coming back, we're not making a decision yet, but we're asking what does that look like? So I will support the motion.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
No comment.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. I haven't heard the conversation about other things. I'm going to suggest, I'm going to vote against this. And not that I don't want it there. I think it's actually a great idea because it's rather tricky to get onto the parkway from the Northfield Boxwood area, because you have to go up Northfield and there's actually no room at all for bikes on Northfield. And then you have to cross a 4-lane highway to get onto the parkway to get all the way down to VIU. So it's actually not a bad idea. But we're actually past, I think we have a motion here to tell staff who's doing their job to do their job. And so based on that, you know, we've already heard in the last report, as Mr. Rosen said, they already gave us a rough idea what it would cost to do that. And I couldn't see staff going to all this work and not coming back to the council later time and say, by the way, we've got this road, we dug it all up, we can put some stuff in here, here's what's gonna cost. You know, you got this, we could probably pay for it out of this reserve. So I'd rather we just let staff do their job because they're doing a good job. Thanks.
Unless I've misinterpreted, misheard, or simply can't comprehend what Mr. Rosen said, I think he said that we haven't even settled on the alignment yet.
No, let me clarify. The water supply pipeline alignment has been settled. And it's been settled for a little while now. But it's presenting some opportunities for transportation that we're still just trying to figure out. And just this one segment of the potential alignment has a certain amount of value, but if you look at it in the context of what the entire alignment, the opportunity the entire alignment presents, that's where it becomes more significant and more significant discussion. I would suggest that it'd be more valuable for council to have a discussion around the potential of the entire alignment and how we sort of prioritize different segments of it along the way, rather than just focus on this one particular segment.
I think this is one of those occasions where George Cuff's words about first heard deferred are more applicable than is often the case. As Councillor Bonner says, what are we doing? We're asking staff to do what staff do, which is often come up with the bright ideas because they're there on the ground doing the work, and then make recommendations to council, and wise councils will follow good advice and they'll refuse to follow poor advice. As much as I appreciate the enthusiasm of Councillors Gesselbrock and Martman, I'm with Councillor Brown, Councillor Thorpe and others on this. I just don't think this is the right time to do this or to consider it. We have a master transportation plan. Even the consideration of what is potentially, you know, and these are just figures out of the air, with respect from staff, but no less out of the air, $1 to $1.5 million, and asking staff to provide a report and study back on it at this stage. I just don't think it makes any sense to me. I simply can't support the motion. Councillor Gesselbrock and then Councillor Bonner, and then I'm hoping everyone has had their say on this. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, just hearing the further discussion on this, I can see how the motion says the water main project next to Box Road, and I think that is a little redundant. I think for myself, I was just wanting to ensure that we were following up on the opportunity for a transportation route along the entire water main for what it does offer, and it sounds like that is still well within what staff are looking at and something that's going to come to us much farther down the line. So I don't think that this motion is necessary, and I'd be happy to just withdraw it and save everybody the effort. So I don't know if the seconder would be happy to withdraw it, but put that forward.
The motion is on the floor. It belongs to the entire body of council.
Okay, we can just vote it down. Thanks.
Unless, Councillor Bonner, you have something you need to...
Only that I'll vote against the motion, but not for the reason Councillor Thorpe's voting against the motion. Different reasons. I did mention we're all together there. We're not.
Well, thank you very much. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? It's unanimously opposed. Well, that was fun. Thank you very much, everyone. I didn't see any public here today, so I assume there's no questions for question period. And I'm just thinking maybe we should break for lunch. Well, we can, to let staff go, we'll maybe ask for the motion to proceed in camera first, then go in camera, and then maybe Councillor Hemmons is moving the motion to proceed in camera. Councillor Bonner is seconding it.